Next we have Amnah Almukhtar. Amnah, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm an organizer with the Iraqi Transnational Collective. So I'm going to speak a bit about the work of the collective, and then I'm going to share some stories from Ali Isa's book, Against All Odds, then talk a bit about organizing that's been happening on the ground after the time period that's covered in this book. Then I'm going to touch briefly on the protest movement in Iraq. So basically when Ali published this book and began to tour with it and got some media attention around it, he was contacted by a lot of Iraqis in the diaspora who had this thirst for learning more about what was going on the ground in Iraq and figuring out ways to work together to support those efforts. So a bunch of us came together over Google Hangout because we're in about 25 locations globally and 10 locations here in the States. And we identified areas of work that we were interested in pursuing and broke up into different committees. So I'll break down a few of the committees. One of them is the Diaspora to Iraq Committee, which is dedicated to learning more about groups that are doing work on the ground in Iraq and developing relationships with them and figuring out how we can best support them, keeping in mind our position in the diaspora and how we can best support their work on the ground. So to give you a sense of the kind of work that committee does, the British security company G4S, which is the largest security company in the world, probably best known for their presence in Israel, equipping Israeli detention centers and prisons, military and security forces, settlements, checkpoints, and also present here in the United States as they run for-profit youth prisons and participate in transporting and deporting migrants who are detained by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Just last month, there was this incredible win. After boycott, divestment, and sanctions pressure on G4S, they announced that they will withdraw from Israel and withdraw from the detention centers in the United States and in Britain. But in September, they secured a contract with a gas company in Basra in the south of Iraq, which is a 3-year contract with the possibility of extension to 5 years. And also just this past January, the Iraqi Department of Transportation announced that G4S had taken emergency measures in the Baghdad airport against the backdrop of a series of bombings that had occurred in the capital during that week. So the Diaspora to Iraq Committee of the collective contacted Falah Alwan, who's the president of the Federation of Workers' Councils and Unions in Iraq, because we knew that they had taken some actions against G4S, and we asked if we were to develop a campaign, if that would support their work in meaningful ways, and he responded positively, so we're hoping to get that work started soon. Another committee that we have is the Oral History Project Committee, which is spearheaded by some of our members out in Los Angeles, who are being trained in conducting oral history interviews so that they can record the stories of Iraqis globally, and not only for us as a diaspora to know our stories and to know our histories, but also to be able to share those stories and to push back against dominant narratives about Iraq as a war-torn place and narratives about Iraqis as victims. Another committee is the Al-Amariya Commemoration Committee, which just completed its work this past February. So we commemorated the bombing of a shelter in the Amariya neighborhood of Baghdad during the first Gulf War in 1991. When over 400 civilians were killed. And I think this commemoration and the work of this committee really speaks to what I just said about the way that our collective is really focused on trying to change discourse around Iraq, to recognize stories of resilience and to recognize that there's so much going on in Iraq besides the war and its aftermath. Because while we were using this as an educational opportunity to raise awareness about the horrors of this massacre and also its wider context, the fact that Iraqis had been living under dictatorship, that they dealt with a decade of war with Iran, and then the first Gulf War, and then a decade of sanctions, and the subsequent war. But also, saying that within that context, Iraqis have thrived in incredible ways, and I think that will show as I begin to share some of these stories. So basically, Ali's book was collected from dozens of interviews that he had conducted with Iraqi feminists, labor organizers, environmentalists, and protest movement leaders from 2003 through 2011. And one of the organizations that's featured prominently in the book is OFI, the Organization of Women's Freedom in Iraq. And they do a whole range of work, but one of the main aspects of their work is that they run shelters for women, running from all sorts of violence. And there's an incredible story in the book about Jannat Al-Ghazi, who's the media director of OFI, who first came into contact with OFI through her own story of having run from threats of violence from her family, and not only found shelter through OFI, but also became highly politicized in this space and became very passionate about organizing and became this really important leader within the organization. So OFI not only does gender work and opposes patriarchal laws and deals with the issue of human trafficking in Iraq, but they also really serve as this incredible organizer training program that's building leadership. Another group that's whose stories are told in Against All Odds is the Federation of Workers' Councils and Unions in Iraq, who has unions throughout the country that focus on a range of issues. And a great story that's told about their work is in 2006, there was an oil law drafted which would give a lot of power to multinational companies in the development of Iraq's oil industry. And the Federation of Oil Workers successfully blocked that oil law in 2007. A group working on environmental justice whose story is told in the book is the Save the Tigris and Marshes campaign, who are pushing back against a proposed dam project in Hassan Kef, north of Iraq. And this project would seriously threaten the Tigris River, which a lot of Iraqi communities depend on for their survival. And although the project was not approved by the Iraqi government, it was just about 2 months ago approved by the Turkish parliament, so it's moving forward. But despite that, the Save the Tigris and Marshes campaign continues their work and continues to push back against this project, and is in contact with a lot of other movements. And as you know, this issue really affects all organizing sectors and has really united Iraqis. So now I'm going to move beyond the scope of the book and tell you some stories about work that's been happening more recently. There's the story of the Dar al-Hikmah bookstore, which is a bookstore on Al-Mutanabbi Street. And Al-Mutanabbi Street is this historic space in Baghdad that is a gathering space for writers and intellectuals. So the owner of the Dar al-Hikmah bookstore started this book delivery service for those who, because of the security situation or for other reasons, might not be able to access bookstores. And the service was so successful that the owner was able to hire a lot of young people to run the website and to interact with the readers through that site and receive requests. Another story is that of the artist Wafat Bilal, who started a Kickstarter campaign to rebuild the College of Fine Arts at the University of Baghdad because in 2003 looters set fire to the collection. So what he did is he created this installation at the Art Gallery of Windsor in Canada, where he set up an installation of 1,000 blank white books, and the funds that come in through the Kickstarter allow them to purchase educational texts which have been compiled, like a wish list has been compiled by the faculty at the College of Fine Arts. So whenever one of these books is purchased from the list, it replaces one of the white books in the installation. And at the end, all of these books will be shipped to the College of Fine Arts. And one of the Iraqi Transnational Collective's members, Nazli Tarzi, just last week wrote a piece about volunteers who came together to renovate and reopen the historic Al-Rashid Theater in Baghdad, which was opened in 1981 but has been deserted for the past decade as a result of coalition airstrikes in 2003 and subsequent looting of the theater. And these volunteers had been promised funds by the Iraqi government to be able to rebuild the theater, but after 13 years of waiting, they decided to take it into their own hands and remove mounds of garbage from the theater, hose down surfaces, and fix up lighting equipment and the stage. And this week we'll be hosting their first performance at the theater. The last story that I'll share is in this past January, there were a series of sectarian attacks in a province called Diyala. So there was a campaign launched by youth from the cities of Najaf, Karbala, and Basra with the aim of going into Diyala and helping to rebuild what was destroyed by the militias with this message of combating sectarianism and ethnic violence in all of its forms. So I'll close by speaking briefly about the protest movement in Iraq. And against all odds, there's a bit about the February 25th, 2011, what was called the Day of Rage, which was part of a larger protest surge in 2011 that resulted in the resignation of several governors across Iraq. And then in 2013, there was another protest surge of this kind, and then just this past summer, there was yet another, and that continues until today. And Iraqis are going out into the streets every Friday, not only in Baghdad, but in Mosul and Basra and Kurdistan. And I think just the recurrence of these protest surges is really indicative of the fact that the system that's in place in Iraq, the sectarian system, simply isn't sustainable. And Iraqis continue to fight it and continue to raise awareness of the issues that they're facing.